Good. And I also need to share my screen. Got it. Share everything. Why not? Okay, maybe not that. Oh, you know what? Sure. Hopefully it's sharing my screen now. Guess I shouldn't move it like that because Zoom has like stuff in the way, but I guess I should move that out of the way instead. Okay. R4 instead of that. Let's go. Hey, why is it being so slow? Okay. So what I wanted to do today is just get started with the explore section. And I know it's a big section, right? So we're obviously not going to cover all of it. We're not even really going to make a huge dent into it because I want to start and just kind of nice and slow so we all have the same kind of background, right? And so if you have worked in Markdown files and R and whatever before, right, then today's an easy day and you can just sit back and enjoy it. And if you haven't, then this one's for you. All right. So here's the R for Data Science textbook. I'll just use the link that I've posted, but you probably have it somewhere. I think you can even download the PDF somewhere. Anyways, doesn't matter. I'll use the website one. Okay. So I wanted to start picking away at the explore section, but there are some key things that I want us to all know before we do. So I'll kind of put the brakes on here and we'll head into the introduction and potentially some data visualization. But it'll be good to kind of work through these on your own potentially. I know you guys are busy, so I don't want to give you like random work to work through, but I would say from what I've read, and confession, right? I haven't gotten to pipes, for example, like we were saying. So I'm not that far into it, but from what I've read, it's really nicely laid out. It has the same tone that I would use. And so I like it. It's easy to read, or relatively easy to read and easy to follow. So I appreciate that. And like I said, Hadley Wickham is kind of like a rock star in the stats community. And there's a lot of famous people that have worked on here. And I mean like famous in the community. Jenny Bryan is a contributor. And she is at UBC Vancouver, and she's also kind of a rock star. So if you want to get enthused, you can look her up. And Hadley Wickham too. He's got like these crazy earrings, like stretched out ears.
He looks like a hipster. He looks like a, computer geek hipster, like Steve Jobs kind of guy.
Yeah, it's yeah. I don't know. I feel I was surprised when I saw what he looked like, but anyways, yeah, pretty cool. And so he's written this with this Garrett, who's also a big name, but I haven't followed him as closely. So Hadley Wickham built the ggplot package, for example, which is what we're going to use to graph stuff. And the reason we use it is because it's harder. No, it makes nicer looking graphs than the base graphics. But for today, I'm just going to stick to the base graphics so that we have an idea of just how to quickly generate some stuff that we've talked about in class, things like histograms. And then we talked about the mean, the median, the mode, right? And so we'll generate those. So what I want to do is make sure I'm recording. I am. Good. And then lost my train of thought. That was important though. We are recording. Okay, so then I want to open RStudio. Okay, and so we're just going to go kind of nice and slow. And I actually want to start with that default R markdown file. So whether you use the one that you handed in, right? Or I think it's easier to just start a fresh one. So that's what I'm going to do if it opens here. Sorry, it is being as slow as it looks. Okay, good. Change this. I feel like I want this space to be empty so that it looks like what it might look like when you open it. Now, another confession time. I have not updated since 2019. What was I doing December 12th, 2019 to need to update R? No clue, but I should probably update. I just keep forgetting. That's okay. This section, right? So when I open RStudio, the look of this hasn't changed. So if it has, then my bad. But in general, this is what it looks like, right? And so we didn't talk about it last day, but the main section, so the left-hand side, is going to be the console. And then when we open up a markdown file, that's going to go in the top left-hand side, and then the console gets bumped down to the bottom. Now the console is the brain, right? That's R. And so that's the language that we're going to use to generate calculations, graphics, whatever, right? But we also want to write stuff around the R code, right? We want to write reports. So I want you to think about kind of the tools that you've probably used in the past, right? If you have to write a report that involves some sort of graph that you've made, you probably would have used Word and Excel, right? And you use them kind of, so you type your blah, 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 you type your report, and then you go to Excel and you generate your graph. And then you have to copy, and then you have to paste it, right? And then you realize that you were using the wrong data set. So then you have to go back into Excel, and then you have to copy and paste it back in. And that just becomes insane. I refuse to do that. We don't need to do that anymore, right? And so that's why we're using this markdown. Because what we're doing when we knit, right? And you've already knitted because you proved it to me, you knitted already, right? We knitted that default document. And so what they mean by knitting is that we're knitting together essentially the Word portion with the Excel portion, right? And so there's going to be kind of the text section that's going to use Markdown versus the code section that uses R, right? And so the graphics, the calculations, those are going to use R. So we're actually accessing two separate brains, right? Or two separate languages. What's nice about Markdown, do you guys know what WYSIWYG is? WYSIWYG, fun to say. What you see is what you get. It's like a programming thing. So a WYSIWYG is it just is what you see is what you get. And so Markdown is a WYSIWYG language. What you see when you program it is essentially what you get. Okay, and that's both a pro and a con of the language. Okay, but it's the simplest typesetting language that we could use. Now, if we wanted more sophisticated things, typesetting things. So typesetting things would be how much spacing do you want between your paragraphs, right? Everything that you would adjust by click, 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 click. I hate click, 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 because it's not reproducible, right? Everything that you would click, 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 click in Word, you can program in what's called LaTeX, right? And it's spelled like latex, but be cool and call it LaTeX, okay? So don't call it latex, call it LaTeX, because that's what it's called. So we will eventually start introducing some LaTeX, right? Because when we're typesetting things like mu, right? We've seen the Greek letter mu. How are we supposed to do that? Well, we introduce LaTeX, and that lets us tell the computer what to produce, okay? And so if you want more control over the document, you'd have to move to a different language. But I'm going to show you some key things that Markdown can do, and it's pretty much all you really need, unless you're trying to make like a crazy report, right? So here we go. I'm going to start a new Markdown file. So like I said, you can use the old one, but it might be nice to just start fresh. Okay. Have you guys played around with the other things that you can do? No, we've been busy, Emily. We can't just be playing around in our studio.
But the professors always say that. It's kind of a cliche. It's like, so you can just play around with this. They always say that. It's like, I'm not playing around with anything. I'm doing the assignment.
Okay, fine. I'll play around for you guys.
Sure.
Just before we get started, just to show you like what kind of fun things we can do. Okay, just to get you enthused. Let's do a shiny. Sounds good, right? All right. So if let's just, and this is just for fun, kind of, it's Friday. We can do whatever we want. Okay.
How we wish we can do all we want. Friday.
With me, you can do whatever you want. Do whatever Bevan says. So, or whoever, I'm assuming you have Bevan for something. Or maybe you have someone else. Joe, maybe. Claude. Who knows?
No.
I don't have Bevan or Joe.
Oh. Well, then, that's no comment. Okay, so so if we start a shiny web app, and I'm just playing around for you guys, remember, so this isn't part of it. Okay, I'm gonna close the chat because it's kind of in the way. Friday Night Lights, I don't know. Create within the directory. I'm just gonna hit create and see what happens. Okay. So now, how do I run this? Run app, but everyone's. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, so just like before with the Markdown file, it just generates, it's called a minimal working example, right? Where it shows kind of what you can do. There are other things beyond this, of course, but it kind of gives you a quick rundown of what we can do. So if you hit run app, okay, and it should have a little bit more. There we go. So without knowing anything about this thing, okay, it has generated this example of something that we could do. Okay, it's using the Old Faithful geyser data, which we can look up. What's the data called? And again, I'm playing around for you.
I'm slightly concerned that that there's no value in this because I don't. Are we going to use this shiny web app thing? Is this relevant somehow?
Yeah, it's cool.
It's cool. Okay.
It's like, what's the point of an appetizer? Just to get you enthused.
Okay. I'm
And
feeling enthused.
you are feeling enthused?
Of course.
Good. That's all I wanted. Okay, so what's cool about this is that it's interactive. So if we want to build something like here, I'll show you. Here, it's just changing the number of bins as I use the slider, right? But you can do things like you can add filters, right? And so you can have filters within your data. You can slide it and you can just look at, this is obviously a very basic example, but that's the point, right? And so we're changing the number of bins, which we saw in class, right? So we can talk about the number of bins, but there it is. And you can see how the distribution is changing, right? And I think that's all it does, yeah. So kind of a minimal working example, but if you wanted to build things like a dashboard, right? A dashboard is interactive, then you would be using Shiny. So that's why I'm showing it to you. But it's kind of like jumping ahead, but that's okay. So you could play around with this code, see what happens, right? Get jiggy with it. But for today, let's do the same thing with something a little bit simpler, and we'll start an R markdown file. Okay, so you could start a Shiny from here if you wanted to, but today I'm going to make what's called a hello world document. Now, hello world is pretty typical in programming. It's kind of like again, an introduction or kind of an overview of things you can do. So we'll call it hello world. We're going to stick to HTML output for today. Okay. Eventually, we're going to move towards PDFs. So if you want to try to generate a PDF, that's great. But it does require tech, right? So that LaTeX that I was talking about, you would have to have some tech version installed. So it can be MikTeX, it can be MacTeX. There's also Tech Live. I feel like I have Tech Shop. So there are a couple of different ones. And I'll see if I can find a concise document to tell you how to download it. But for now, I mean, you can play your way there, right? It's probably going to prompt you. So I have all the LaTeX installed on this computer, so it's not going to prompt me for anything. But if you hit PDF, it would probably say, hey, you need to download this. Do you want to go to this website and download it? Yes, follow the trail, right? Because eventually we're going to want to produce PDFs, right? It feels kind of weird to share an HTML document. Although it's cool to share a little mini website, right? It's not really that professional, right? So we're going to start with HTML, but eventually we're going to work towards a PDF. Okay. So let's hit OK. All right. So what I want to do is just talk about all the different components, right? Because this is a minimal working example. And so it's just kind of showing you some of the things that can be done. Now, there's this environment that's enclosed by are they dashes? Dash, dash, dash? They're not slashes. I think they're dashes.
Suppose we can call it a dash.
Is it a dash?
That's what I call it.
Okay, sold. So this dash, dash, dash environment is called the YAML. And in my previous class, I had someone look it up, and I knew it was funny, right? Because it's called the YAML, which I'm typing in the chat here. It's yet another markup language. Another one. It's marked down, right? But it's markup in the YAML. So the YAML is just giving the header information, right? All the information that the document needs to produce something, okay? It basically just needs to know what the output is. In this case, we told it to do an HTML document, so that's what it says. You could tell it to do an HTML and a Word document if you wanted to, but let's just kind of keep it simple today. A heads up, if you do, and you can change the title, right? Like what if I just want to change it to, and I'm going to make a mistake on purpose here. What if I just change it to hello, right? But I accidentally.
Where's the quote?
It was an accident.
Well, R doesn't care if you make accidents or not.
It does not, and it will give you stink. So if you see something like that, notice how it changes the color. So it's trying to tell you that, hey, this is something I don't know what to do with, right? And so I need to close it up. So just something to keep in mind. I see that really often when people think, oh, I'm going to change the author to be something else or the title to be something else. I actually like the title, Hello World. I think it's really kind of cute to think about. So I'm going to change it back. But so this is the YAML, okay? And sometimes if there's an error, for example, if we did run it like this and I hit knit, oh, what's the first thing? It needs to save it. Fine, I'll save it first. So my kind of working method is everything that I'm working on currently is on my desktop. I know everyone's different. I used to hate working off of my desktop, but now I kind of keep that as my ironically, my desktop, I guess, kind of my workspace, right? And so, but wherever you want to save it is fine. I'm going to save it on my desktop. And I'm going to call it Hello World, potentially spelled correctly. And I'm going to avoid any spaces. They might have changed it, they might have fixed it, but it used to not run if you had a space in your name, right? And so camel type or underscores, those are safe, right? And so maybe just to show you, I'll have my name. And I think I already have one on there from earlier. So how about, I almost wrote Emily G. It's Emily Lee now. Emily 2, that's fine. Save. Okay. So now I've got this messed up YAML, but I don't know that. So I go to knit and error in YAML, right? So it tries to point you in the right direction. And so what I like to point out is that the more error codes that you see, right, the quicker you'll be at figuring out what it means, right? And so don't be upset when you see an error code. You can usually just Google things. And something I hadn't even thought about that Hadley Wickham pointed out in the textbook is that if you're working, so if your computer is set to a language other than English, he has a little code chunk that you can run to convert the error code to English, because that's going to have a lot more answers, right? If you're not getting anything when you Google it. So, because I know that happens a lot. We want to work in the language that we're most familiar with, right? And so your error code might not be in English, but he does go through it and say how to change it to English. So that's pretty cool. So the error is in the YAML. I found the error. Now I fixed it, and now I'm going to knit it. So kind of what we mentioned before, when us teachers are like, just play around with it, you know, just see what happens, just play around with it. What I want you to do is just kind of do a compare and contrast. For example, here I've got this link, right? How did I create, or how did they create this clickable link that takes me to another website? Well, I can trace it back to here, right? And how they did that is simply by putting it in, I don't know what they're called. Triangular brackets, carets,
Sharp. What's that?
less than, greater than brackets. What
Yeah.
are they called?
I've called them less or greater than my entire life, and I'm doing fine. So I'll go with that.
That makes two of us. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Any takers? Yeah. Less than, greater than.
Yeah.
Right.
That's less than greater than.
Yeah. But anyways, I think we all know what I mean here. We can see it on the screen. And so this is how we generate that clickable link. So that's really easy, right? If you need to refer to a website, and I use that a lot, especially if I'm writing notes to myself, right? Then I'll just include, oh, I grabbed this from here, right? And I'll just have that link so that I can refer back to it. And usually it's just for my personal knowledge, right? There's also things like the double stars around a word or multiple words. Now this one, we can go back here, right? And we see that that creates a bold word, okay? What I can do is we could also change it to be around multiple words. We'd have to knit it again, right? So we know how to make bold text, right? And through some quick Googling, you can make italicized text. There are a couple of ways, actually. I'm pretty sure there's a couple of ways. How about I italicize generated that includes? So this chunk of text here, I'm gonna italicize just because I can. So one way that I like to do it, because I like to keep them separate, is I'll put underscores around whatever I need to italicize. Notice that it acknowledges that I've done something by turning it a different color, okay? Which also means it's kind of closed off, right? And so if I hit knit here, it worked. So we've got this italicized generated that includes, right? Whatever I put underscores around. We can even do something like combine the two. As long as the order is the same on both sides, it kind of unfolds around it. We can do something like underscore star star, or star star underscore should work as well. Embedded R code chunks, let's do all of it. Star star underscore. Right, as long as we're symmetric around whatever we want to do, it should work. So, ta-da, bold and italicized, right? It's a little bit more work than in Word, right? But at least you can go through and you don't have to change it every time, right? It's just there in your code. There's also this header, right? So there's the markdown header and, is there any other option? Then knitting it again and again. No. I know, annoying, right? There's a shortcut to knit, and I think on so I'm on a Mac, so it might be, it's probably similar, but I think it's Command I. Oh, that didn't work. Command Shift I. Nope. I feel like it's something I. K. Shift Control K. Knit.
I think that you can just run individual lines of code and then it just shows up in the console at the bottom.
You totally can. So if you're just working on your R code, which is in this gray section, then before you knit, if it's taking a long time to knit, for example, if you're doing a lot of plots, or if you're dealing with a huge data set, it might take a little bit longer to knit. Then what I do is I make sure that my R code is running properly before I knit it, right? And so then that's when I would just run this chunk of code, the summary of cars. So when we look at this gray section, this is the R code. And how I think about it is that's where things that we would do in Excel would happen, right? And so if you think about Word and Excel, which we're used to dealing with, right, then everything in the white section is, and I'm getting caught up on the chat too, but everything in the white section, that's your Word document, right? That's where you write your report, and that's where you kind of make it look pretty, right? And then in these gray sections, that's where you generate your graphs and your calculations, right? Whatever you want to show and include in your document. Oh yeah, so because we're making an so just going back to the chat here, so it kept opening in Chrome, probably because that's your default browser. Because we're making a web page, that is where it would open, right? If we knitted to a PDF, for example, it would open as whatever your default PDF viewer is, right? Adobe Preview, whatever. And then same thing for Word, it would open, if we knitted to Word, it would open in a Word document. Thank you for the angle brackets. And then good. I think I'm all up to date here. Whew. It's bumping. Okay, before we move on to the R code chunk, I want to talk about these headers, right? And so a hashtag or pound makes a header. There are a couple of things we need to make sure. We have to have a blank line before and after a header, otherwise it's not going to work. Okay, and also there has to be a space between the pound sign and the text, otherwise it's not going to generate. So for example, I can add a first level header here, and then I'm going to knit it. Okay. Notice that the first level header would be the same as kind of chapter 1, and then the second level header would be section 1, third level header subsection. But if you just want huge text, you could use the header document or the header code, right? If you just want to write huge, then make it all a header. It's weird, but you can. So it's kind of adjusting the font size. Right. If I do something like, maybe I'll do a fourth level header and I forget to put a space here, fourth level header, and then I knit it again to see what happens, right? Notice that it didn't actually do it, right? it's just putting the pound sign, pound sign, pound sign, pound sign, fourth level header, right? So then I see, okay, I must have forgotten the space. A lot of it is just recognizing mistakes that you've made in the past and correcting them. So now it's this proper fourth level header. Okay. Some other things that might be useful in the text portion, right, is making a list. Right, we can make lists or we can make bullets. Right, that's going to be useful. Right, first I'm going to do this, then this, then this. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is between here and here, anywhere really, I am going to put a second level header called bullets. Why second level? I don't know. I'm just matching what they did here. Makes it look nice. So here are some bullets. More rules to follow. We love rules, right? Tell us what to do. And so we need to have a line, an empty line between the text and the bullets. So we need to have 1, 2, okay? Otherwise it's not going to generate. And then if we want to make just bullets, we're going to use a dash. Okay. We have to follow it with a space just like the header. Okay. And so here's bullet 1. Next line, bullet 2. Good enough. Right. And then I'm pretty sure it has to have an empty space below it as well, but can play around with that and see, but I'm pretty sure. So we have to have space here and a space here. Then we can hit knit and it'll generate these kind of nicer looking bullets. But same idea. So what about numbers? Wait. Or numbered lists. How about that? Right? Word does that. So of course, Markdown does that. I shouldn't say of course. It's not of course. Word does some interesting stuff, but most of it is covered in Markdown. So here is a numbered list. Again, a space. And to start a numbered list, you start with the number that you want it to start with. So 1 period, okay, and again a space, number 1. What's fun is I can actually just keep going with 1 and you'll see what happens. Number 2. I'll keep going for a third one. Number 3, okay. So when we knit this, you'll see what it does. Okay. What's nice about this is that even if we change our minds later and we go to change the order, we don't have to adjust the numbering, right? It's just automatically generated. So that's really nice. And it's just going to start with whatever number you put at the start, right? And so it doesn't care about these future ones. It just needs to know that, okay, and then another number and then another number, right? So even if I start here and call this 14, when I knit this, it should have bullets 14, 15, 16. What a relief. It did. I'm not lying. So, right, whatever number you start with, it's just going to keep going with it. You can also do it with letters, right? But let's do something crazy. Right, I changed my mind. I want number 3 at the top. Oh my gosh. 1, 2, 3. All right. So it actually doesn't care about the numbers here. It just goes with it. Right. Same thing with What if I want to do A 1? I can go B if I want to 2, C 3. One, 2, 3, A, B, C. Oh, that's confusing. No, not really, but fun. What if I want to put it like this? Remember, it doesn't care about these. It only cares about the first one. Hey, it threw me off. I forgot. I thought I cut it, but I guess I just copied and pasted. So now I have 1, 3, 2, 3, starting with A. So even though it says A, C, B, C, it just doesn't care, right? It picks up on the clue and it just goes with it. Okay.
Did you say that this information is coming from that online data science textbook?
This one is just kind of me winging it.
Oh, okay.
Only because they don't cover the markdown because they think it's so easy. But if we haven't worked with this at all, right, it's nice to have these kind of core text things under our belt. But yeah, we're heading there. We're getting there. But yeah, we need to be able to like write about our analyses too. So that's why I'm introducing it now so that we have it. Good. So kind of bullets, numbered lists, alphabetized lists. What else? Bold, italicized. Anything else you might want to do is probably in this markdown link that they've included, right? All right. Or just Google it, right? How do I do this in Markdown? Right? Key is remembering that we're working in Markdown, the language. Okay, so now I want to move towards, wow, broken record over here, but time flies.
When you're having fun.
I'm having fun. I don't know about you guys.
It's all right. It's all right.
I'll take it. So here, like we said, everything in kind of a gray section is going to be our code, right? And so how I want, or how I think about it at least, is that's going to be the Excel portion, right? So that's what I said. The default always comes with this global options setup, okay? So eventually we're going to want to set all the options globally, meaning for the entire document, I don't need to repeat myself because it's here in the global options. However, for us, when we're just kind of starting and we're just kind of swimming around here, it looks a little bit confusing, right? So we can go ahead and delete it, and I'll bring it up when we need to, or you can look into it, that's fine too. But I'm going to go ahead and delete it, okay? Because we don't need it. As promised, I'm going to knit just to make sure. So if you're making changes and you're not sure if what you're doing is kind of legal or not, then keep knitting, right? Knit often so that you kind of make sure that everything's running. Same thing with your code. You want to run it pretty often because that's how you're going to check these or catch these typos that you will undoubtedly have. So notice that nothing has changed here, right, by deleting that chunk, so it's safe. And I'll use it eventually, but for now, no. All right, so the code chunk that I want to talk about is called cars, right? And so one thing that I want to point out is that they've named this code chunk cars. We don't have to name the code chunks. It just makes it easier to refer to them. But just to show you that it would still run without the name, just to boil it down, I'm going to knit it here. Okay, so it still produces the summary, and some of these values look, or all of these values look familiar, right? We've got the minimum, the maximum. Definitely, we've talked about the median, the mean. I don't think we've talked about the quartiles yet. But we will. But I can't honestly remember. But anyways, here they are. Okay, and so the summary command is probably going to be your go-to command for just kind of getting a rough idea of the data. For example, if I go back to the summary, let it catch up here. Okay. If we compare the median and the mean, and I know we talked about this last day, right? If we compare the median and the mean and they're similar, what does that give me a clue about the distribution? If they're similar, it tells me that this distribution is most likely symmetric, right? And the most common symmetric, oh, sorry.
Yes, normal, yes.
Yeah, you guys are good, right? If it's symmetric, it's most likely normal versus the distance, right? So pretty self-explanatory variables here. The distance, 36 versus 42.98. It doesn't look normal, but we could take it one step further, right? We think it's skewed in the positive direction, right? Because the mean is always pulled in the direction of the tail, but also the tail is the direction of the skew, right? So skewed to the right or skewed, positively skewed. And with that, I guess I'm out of time. So just kind of a fun intro. I've got some exercises that I'll post, but you'll have all next week to work on them. So just play around a little bit more until I post those. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to stop this recording and have a great weekend.